Wow. Okay. So my little, yes, my show completely. Yeah. Okay. So welcome to the Toronto Daily News. This is for Wednesday, January the 23rd. It was foggy. Holy moly, it was foggy. And you know what? Katie Simpson of the CBC just keeps getting more and more awesome every single. But she has in the last national, she's something's happened. She's gotten more. She's gotten another. I've been paying attention to Katie Simpson because she's kind of part of the new run of CBC journalists, and she's check her out. She rules. This this bike path, right, that was going to happen between where was it? It was going to be from Banff to Jasper. It's going to be so cool. So the to bike between places in Canada, it's always been really terrible, and so there's this project called the Great Trail. Now it's this idea for a bike trail to span east west across Canada. It sort of breaks up on either side of the Rockies, etc. But anyway. So it wasn't going to be part of it, but it's a segment that would be great because it's just right now it's just this sort of highway that goes through. It's beautiful, just beautiful. I mean, amazing land, and you're looking at it on Google Maps, you think like this would just be a total cinch. They're talking about like cement is difficult to run through and stuff, but you don't need cement. I mean, they could do there's lots of cool things you can do with dirt and stuff. Anyway, so the CBC has reported that Parks Canada did a news release on Wednesday that 23rd, that they're not going to proceed with the proposed Icefields Parkway Trail between Banff and Jasper. They said they like there was a previous CBC article about it's called Unhappy Trails and proposed Icefield thing that's canceled. And so the complaints are like this, that if there's a trail going through that, it might induce further development like campgrounds and rest stops and stuff like that. Like that's so bad for the environment. So they're essentially complaining about like ecotourism is going to be bad for the environment. Having an alternative to driving through here is going to be bad for the environment. Okay. And the wetlands are not sufficiently mapped. Well, there's a road going like through that. There's a so and that cyclists might encounter grizzly bears. Like, I don't know, they might run into grizzly bears. They just don't want to do this. I mean, the area, it would be so cool to be able to bike through there. It would come halfway toward closing this kind of weird gap in the currently proposed cycling path, like where it goes off like west of Edmonton to the northwest and the south, and then the south one goes like west, right, from near the border, and then the north one goes northwest, and so, but there's this kind of wraparound thing that happens that Jasper is kind of in the middle of and Banff is at the end of, and so it would be cool to go halfway, and then maybe they could do, it would just make the other half of it so much easier. And it's a beautiful opportunity, but this kind of goes to demonstrate like Canada is just not working at all to create a regional, like network of cycling stuff, even as just basic stuff on the side of current existing roads. And it really it goes to show like their commitment to the auto and oil sector in terms of just like making it difficult to not live in a city and to do stuff between cities without driving. It's really like it's an artificial constraint. In Toronto, there's apparently they're not going to like force the people camping out under the Gardiner near the Spadina like ramps and stuff under the Spadina ramps to get out on Thursday, on today, as they had sort of alluded to previously. So the Toronto Star on Tuesday reported on this, and they said they interviewed Paul Raftis, the general manager of Shelter Support and Housing Administration, and he's saying that we're not going to be forcing people to leave. What we're doing is just telling them that after this time, your stuff, if it's left around, it might be, your stuff, we could just grab your stuff and store it for you, and you can come to us and get it. And this is when the city grabs people's stuff, they do have a program where you can go to them, and they do store people's stuff and return them to people. So they do have a system for removing people, homeless people's stuff, and then allowing them to come and claim it. So that's what they're talking about doing. So it's this kind of like soft eviction type of thing. So there are basically, as of Wednesday evening, there is sort of maybe a dozen tents on, like maybe a handful on either side of Spadina, underneath the Gardiner ramps and stuff. And the architecture of the sort of like the design of the transportation system there, it creates these sort of dead zones which are sheltered and which are in pockets. So it's kind of like a cul-de-sac neighborhood. It just creates these spaces where there's only one way in and one way out, and it's a difficult sort of weird way to go through somewhere, and the access is limited, or it's illegal to be there, but you can easily get to it or something like that. And it's those places throughout anywhere that end up like host to homeless people when they set up encampments. And ironically, those are the type of places that like reports that called for tearing down the Gardiner and turning it, just replacing it with an on the ground 8-lane boulevard. There would have been the opportunity to create cheap housing in exactly those spaces that people are occupying right now, which are right now just set aside only for being able to integrate a expressway into a downtown transportation network. And it completely disrupts the downtown network for everybody else. So, which was also one of the reasons to tear down the Gardiner. So it's ironically projects like the Gardiner, when we maintain them, they both create the conditions for homelessness by removing more housing stock area, and they also create the physical spaces for those same people to locate their campsites. And it's really, there's no way you can really criticize people for setting up makeshift shelters there, because what is anybody else using that space? The only damage that they're doing is to themselves with the insane amount of carbon monoxide that they're inhaling all the time. But this city guy just keeps in this interview with the Star, or this press conference, or what this release did, he keeps talking about how they're going to offer people housing supports, and there's room in the shelters and stuff like that. So once again, it's a he said she said about like, oh, the city person's just like, oh well, this stuff that you're trying to avoid by having your campsite in the first place, that's what is going to absorb you, because you can't camp here. It's ridiculous. According to the Toronto Star is like reporting on sort of a roundup of recent pedestrian deaths in January, people hit by drivers and stuff, in their article about this recent incident and at Dufferin, and like just south of Eglinton, on the 16th. And so the article, pedestrian 75 struck by vehicle last week has died, Toronto police say. So that's by the Star. they round up sort of the other recent deaths in January, and then their statistics about last year's casualties, road casualties. In the late morning, a man fell to his death from possibly the 42nd floor of a Young and Wellesley building that was under construction. CTV News is reporting this. They reported it on Tuesday. And he was dead at the scene. Police say they're not investigating, and they don't have details about it for us. So in Mississauga, the traffic lights and stuff like that, and a lot of other systems had lost power on Wednesday. Like 4,000 homes is according to InSauga. InSauga.com. So they said it was causing traffic havoc, and so Toronto Pride, they had a vote, I think on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday they announced that officially that they're not going to be having uniformed police officers in this coming Pride Parade. So it was an announcement by their executive director, and the takeaway. So the Toronto Star reported on this. The takeaway is they're going to have less funding because the cops are not going to be visibly in attendance. It's weird. It's like a sponsorship deal. So they've decided to go with the financial limitations and constraints and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind a less funded, less glitzy, maybe less corporate Pride, but I don't know. So officers in Waterloo Regional Police Service, they have said in a news release on Tuesday morning, and CBC News reported on it on Tuesday, they're not going to be attending. They're going to decide on the 911 phone call whether to attend crashes instead of just automatically attending like every crash. And Toronto Police did. The CBC also reported on this, like in March of 2016. They did an article about how the Toronto Police had shifted. They made this shift as well, so they're sort of triaging calls during the 911, during the emergency call or whatever kind of call it is, to decide whether they're going to put a uniformed officer in. But they decided they will still respond if the condition, and I'm quoting the CBC article about from March 2016, they will still respond if the collision involves alcohol or drugs, if someone is taken to the hospital, or if there's an unlicensed or uninsured driver. They'll also arrive if it involves pedestrians or cyclists, and if the incident happened between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. when collision reporting centers are closed. So that is, I don't know, hit rewind and listen to that again, but that is or check this article out. So those are that is our official word on like when police are definitely going to show up to the scene of a collision, or when they will make a judgment call based on the time. In other locale news from Toronto, 260 Wellesley as of Wednesday is still in the dark, and there's no water. Residents are not. They haven't evacuated them though. There is some kind of a hearing with management, and this representative from the management company it's like answering questions from residents and stuff. One of them was accusing them of trying to get rid of them through attrition, because this is after the other building, owned by the same company, like right across the street or something, got all messed up in the fall. Everybody, and they evacuated people from one building to the other. Now this building, so they're looking at this other place as like, okay, so you've had all fall to get people back into this other building, and now this one is all messed up. Like, they are, so those residents are furious, and they're kind of screwed too. A flood watch has been issued by like the Toronto Conservation Authority, and flooding is what caused this situation at 260 Wellesley. It's insane. It's insane. So this Toronto oncologist has gotten in trouble for having a relationship with one of her patients. He basically, apparently, he just became so distraught after she dumped him and stopped providing medical care at the same time. The College of Physicians, provincially, calls her behavior abhorrent. The Lambton Avenue residents who lost their house to a fire the other day or something, got a whole bunch of support from the local community. The Black Creek Facebook group rallied together, and it progressed from there. So CTV is telling us all, shovel the snow or it'll turn to ice. Let's shovel it now. I'm saying just sweep it. Just sweep it. It's so much easier to sweep it than shoveling it. I don't know why everybody shovels when you could just sweep it. It was an extremely foggy Wednesday, and the drivers and pedestrians were wilding out there on it's sometimes when it's rainy or foggy or conditions are a little crazy, it makes people go more careful. Yesterday, for whatever reason, people corrected in the other direction, and just it was a combination of like just Toronto drivers being savvy, but the crazies were out in abundance with just weird. It was pretty insane. The cyclist situation was not that bad, but there weren't that many of them. The drivers and pedestrians were a little wild though. So the Field Trip Music and Arts Festival is going to be canceled, and there's no explanation as to why. And the okay, so in other news, in provincial news, in Ajax news, there was a derailment of a freight train, apparently carrying a bunch of grain. Now, okay, so we're supposed to support pipelines because derailments, truck accidents and stuff with shipping trucks are really damaging and whatever. But the press can just over report trucking and rail disasters and under report pipeline disasters. And just keep in mind who their advertisers are. That's my advice. A mystery noise is keeping Kingston residents confused and alarmed. The RCMP has actually refused to comment on whether it's because of any of their aircraft. They're like, we can't tell you what we're doing with our aircraft, so we can't tell you that it's not us. The military, meanwhile, they've said, well, we're not doing that stuff during, it can't be us, but we're not going to absolutely say that it wasn't one of our planes ever. This is CTV reported on this. So if you're in Kingston, maybe get some recordings. I don't know. There's all these reports of weird sounds around the world, and then you go find a good recording. It's like somebody's crappy cell phone thing. A Zoom recorder you can rent them for very cheap. Very cheap. Good microphones on those things too. 2 pedestrian casualties happened in Toronto on Wednesday. In Mississauga, it was a fatal collision. In Newmarket, somebody ended up in hospital. So the CBC is running this. They ran this pro-fluoridation segment on the National. And did this bit about how Windsor dentists have noticed tooth decay issues with their poor population, right? Since defluoridating 5 years ago. So this is in a place where, and they don't mention like, okay, well, poor people don't have access to dental care, proper dental care, right? Because because it's not subsidized like the rest of their healthcare is. They just did the whole thing without mentioning that. And so, but they did mention that it's poor people who are noticing the difference. So they're like, yeah, we've got to just make everybody drink fluoride so that this, and drinking fluoride is really, it's such an inferior way to get fluoride treatment. I mean, like there's nobody is, I don't know. It's really it's almost like class war, type of thing for the media to be like promoting fluoridation, which we get which there's industrial pressure to do, and citing studies supporting it, not even mentioning that there's a ton of good studies opposing fluoridation. And they want to, brought to you by Selection. Oh my gosh, this one does have fluoride in it. No wonder I'm feeling all messed up. Depending on the size and the format, even from the same brand, it might or may not have fluoride. Wow, I'm so screwed. This is why I'm feeling all messed up. I've been like, why am I feeling so dehydrated? And fuck my life. So yeah, as I'm doing a segment about fluoride, I realized that's crazy. So sometimes when you buy the 12 pack, it's not fluoridated, but the 24 pack will be, but it's the same individual bottle size. But I got that because it was on sale. I usually check every single time. So yeah, so the CBC is promoting fluoridation, and then and they will mention that it's for the benefit of poor people, but they won't mention that it's poor people who suffer from a lack of subsidized dental care. It's insane. It's insane. It's class war. I'm accusing the CBC of participating in class war against the poor. So hey, gosh, I really am dehydrated feeling. It's like if you get fluoride poisoning, it's just it feels like a hangover. Just feels like a hangover. Part of it, it's like half of the hangover symptoms. Anyway, a 28-year-old veteran of the Niagara Regional Police Service faces sexual assault charges in relation to. This is reported by the Star on Wednesday. He was running like a massage parlor out of his place on the side and accepting and like assaulting people who went to like assaulting women who went as customers. Like, wow. So Bill 66, one of the things about it was it might have opened up this opportunity for like regional bits and pieces of the Green Belt to ask for permission to do development that usually they wouldn't be able to do, in some of it in protected areas, so it could lead to environmental collapse and whatever. And so the provincial government now, Steve Clark of the Conservatives, he's saying, well, no, that's never what it was going to be used for. But since you guys are all scared, we won't proceed with that part of it. He says we will not proceed with Schedule 10 of the bills, according to his tweets from Wednesday. And the in Vancouver News, the police have been doing this since June. Okay, they've been doing these stings where they go online, and go on as teens that are in chat rooms or whatever, just to meet other teens, or on dating sites or whatever. And teens, I guess do go online to find other teens for hanging out or dating or something like that. I kind of wish I'd had that in high school, but of course not if there's a whole bunch of predators on there, and that's what everybody would have been concerned about. And so that's what people are doing. So teens are going online to find new friends or new relationships, and adults are going online to find them. And those adults include, according to this bust, former trustee, former Vancouver School Board trustee Ken Clement, and a former teacher at Little Flower Academy, an all-girls private Catholic school. This is according to Global News. And so them and they 7 men, including these 2, have been arrested and charged. But there's 47 men have been arrested. Okay, 47 men arrested, and then 7 of them already charged. And this is just from, but in June, the school trustee guy, I think it was the school trustee guy, resigned, citing personal reasons. So when they were doing this thing, he resigned, and I guess he wasn't able to talk about it then because it was still ongoing. So nice work, Vancouver police. I mean, I think last year we had a couple of similar things here in Ontario where police busted like rings of people who were trafficking minors and stuff like that, and like actually rescued children, from sexual slavery that was going on right here in the GTA under our noses. And so this is happening all over the country. Meanwhile, so on Wednesday, the RCMP issued this correction about an Alberta, somebody near Red Deer, stole a vehicle, crashed it into a school bus, stole another vehicle, took off. They say it was in Delburn, which is in the Three Hills RCMP detachment area. But originally, people thought it was in Three Hills. Okay, so in Winnipeg on February 14th, a guy fell asleep on a transit bus. At the end of the line, operator tried to kick him off. Guy didn't want to go. He's like, can't you just drop me at somewhere? There's stuff. There's nothing here. It's too cold. They get into a fight, and he ends up stabbing the TTC operator. And then on Wednesday, they called several witnesses. And so CBC has reported on that hearing that happened on Wednesday. And he's pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder. In Vancouver, on CTV on Wednesday, they published this thing. This guy's being evicted because his child is being way too loud in the apartment. He's getting in way too much shit for his kid, apparently stomping and stuff. So oil has dipped even further in value. The TSX has also deflated a bit, and the Canadian dollar has gained some value as well. Our ambassador to China he did this press conference with the Chinese press and really got into it about this Huawei executive. So Canadian Historical Archives has received this book, and it's kind of this it's this report, basically this Nazi report for Hitler, about their plans for North America and about all the Jews living in all the different places in North America. And so they've got this crazy publication now available, and they're going to show it, but they promise not to venerate it. They promise not to display it in a way that venerates it. And it's talk about a weird piece of violence history. about it's just so weird to see like the Nazi plans for our continent. Their plan. In American news, the woman who gave birth after being comatose for like years and years and years. They did a DNA test on everybody who works at the hospital, of course, in the States. This is in Phoenix. And they found a match, and they arrested, I'm sorry for laughing, like this is so terrible, the 36-year-old nurse who is a match. And she's been in this institution since she was a child, this woman who they didn't even know was pregnant until she went into labor, and she's been in a coma the whole time. Isn't that insane? That's so insane. 7 people were killed during remember when I said the situation in Venezuela is really messed up? 7 people have been killed during demonstrations there. The president, the illegitimate president that the international community and whom the local press are indicating the Venezuelan public are opposed to, he has the military on his side. He doesn't want to be deposed. Meanwhile, the opposition leader has claimed the presidency, and he's been acknowledged by the international community as the president, and Trump is even offering military support. So there could be a ground war in Venezuela, I suppose. It's 4 Americans were killed in Syria. ISIS claimed responsibility, and then the Syrian government was like, don't worry, ISIS isn't a threat. Nancy Pelosi wants Donald Trump to just not do his State of the Union address because everybody's furloughed and stuff. She's like, I don't want to put staff through this. You're not going to do this address. Activists are picketing Sony because they still haven't, like them and RCA still haven't dropped R. Kelly from their record label. They still haven't. So they're in New York. So Brazil's response to the serious, insane gun violence situation is to make gun ownership easier for the non-criminal public. This is Bolsonaro's tough on crime theme. The Vice Daily News reports that like they did a little documentary interview with some of the armed criminals responsible for said gun violence, and they said, well, this is going to escalate the war between us. Instead of us going to war just with the other gangs, we'll be at war with the police and the public as well. So this is just going to make our skills all the more valuable. So Theresa May has survived her no confidence vote. A former coal lobbyist has become the head of the EPA in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency, headed by a coal lobbyist. So that, my friends, is the news for Toronto for Wednesday. Have a fantastic Thursday, and keep it together.